Hi everyone. So in this particular class, would be giving you a brief description regarding the CS2 examination. So this particular class would be on the lines of the 10 topics which I've mentioned, which is available on the screen. So firstly, to begin with, I would be giving you a brief description regarding how the CS2 paper is and so on. So CS2 is basically actuarial statistics 2. It draws upon the knowledge from whatever you've studied in CS1. As a lot of you would know, there are different forms of insurance, be it life insurance, general insurance, health insurance, so on. So, whatever topics we are going to study for this paper is something which is more relevant towards the general insurance. Certain parts of paper CM2 is also there, which is extensively required in general insurance. Apart from that, majorly, if you would want to pick up one paper among the initial set of exams, then CS2 will have a lot of technical content which is required when working in a general insurance setup. So, among all the initial examinations, among the CV, CM, CS examinations, this is my personal belief that when it comes to clearing CS2, this is definitely one of the most challenging papers. So the challenge is of a different format. Two things where students tend to struggle, and CS2 has both of them. First being the ability to apply. So here you would be looking at several questions where you actually need to apply. There is no similar type of question previously, specifically for one or two chapters. The questions which do come in examinations, they could be completely new. So Markov chain is one of those topics, which is there. We would be covering that later on. Just to give you a brief idea, that is one of those topics. However well prepared you are, since you need to make a model in that particular question a lot of times, that totally depends whether you are being able to crack it in the examination or not, and that makes it a lot more challenging. Second reason is key compared to other papers, the relative questions asking for comments or theory, not direct theory, given the online open book format. Direct theory is something which is hardly there now. But the comment based questions, it is something which a lot of students struggle for various reasons. One could be simply because they tend to ignore it given the relatively low weightage in the earlier examinations one would have appeared for, say CM1 or CS1. Secondly, they do encounter a lot of difficulty with respect to being able to write their ideas in a structured format. So I mean, both when it comes to writing comments part, which or application based theory as well as application based numericals, students do tend to struggle. But the good part about this paper, I would say, is that a lot of students tend to enjoy, if at least not from examination clearing point of view, but at least from the point of view of studying, getting to know the various topics. Most of the students do tend to enjoy it. And so this is regarding the paper. Another peculiarity of this paper is key almost all the topics, the major topics, not the chapters, I would say, because a particular topic might be covered in 2 3 chapters. But let's say if we have around excuse me, 9 to 10 major topics in this particular paper, almost all of them are independent. One big advantage of that is in case you haven't studied for few topics, and let's say you're attending the live online sessions or the offline batches, you would be in a position to understand if a new topic gets started. Something which you would not have encountered in papers CM1 or CS1, where things are very much connected. Among all the papers, CS2 is the one where the topics are a lot more independent. So the advantage is definitely this. One disadvantage of this is that once you move from one topic to another topic and then say another topic, so on, there is a high tendency to be not be able to recall things which you did at a earlier point of time. So I will give you my experience when I was preparing for this paper, not CS2, but the old papers according to the old curriculum, CT6 part primarily. So I was forgetting a lot of stuff during my first time of practice. When I'm practicing a set of questions, I was being able to solve, but let's say a month or 6 weeks later, when I'm again trying to take a look at the topic, it took a bit of time. I had to go through my notes again, what all topics are there. Given that once you move from one topic to another, there's a complete difference, and so at one go you might not be able to recall all the stuff. So that is something in case you are also encountering in your preparation, please be absolutely comfortable about it. It's nothing sort of a problem specific to you. It is in general which students tend to experience in this particular paper. Next thing is the prerequisite knowledge. What all knowledge do we require for this particular examination? So like with all other actuarial exams, it is assumed that students do know English and they obviously do have knowledge of the concepts of maths taught till class 12. That is a prerequisite for almost all actuarial exams, I would say. Apart from that, it is directly assumed that students do have all knowledge from paper CS1, be it for the paper A concepts or a part of it using the paper B concepts as well. And we would see that certain chapters, one or two chapters would be having some relation with what one might have studied in paper CM1. So a compulsion, I would say, CS1 or CT3 under old curriculum, you should be knowing the concepts when studying with CS2. In case you have appeared for this paper long back, you do not remember what was there. There are two ways to go about it. One way is you could simply take up the CS1 or CT3 material, go through the topics and all. Alternatively, second way is ki, instead of doing that and going through everything of CS1 or CT3, start preparing for CS2. Whenever you see a particular topic, which you're not being able to recall, which had been covered previously, you can take the help of the CS1 or CT3 material and go through that particular topic. This is just a bit more time efficient, given that you'll end up revising only those topics which are required for the purpose of, let's say, understanding the CS2 topics. So this is the prerequisite knowledge. Along with that, there are few other things, let's say solving differential equation, the concept of integration factor, and so on. So these all are also something which is required. It's something which most of you would have covered while preparing at a school level maths, or even at a college level. And again, we would be briefly touching into it in case you do not recall it. It has been a long time, or let's say the ones in the last 2 years, there had been a lot of changes to the school syllabus, keeping in mind the COVID situation. And in case you have ignored this, I would be touching upon at least what results we are going to be using. So this was with respect to the prerequisite knowledge. Next, calculator. As with all other papers, the calculator which you all need to use, or which I would recommend, is using Casio FX82 ES Plus model. Do keep in mind, currently given the online set of examinations, IFoA does not have any restriction to the choice of calculator you are using. IAI does have restrictions. The set of allowable calculators are something which are there available on the website. So I would say, in my understanding, among all the calculators, FX82 ES Plus is the more user friendly and the one which has a lot of let's say different functionalities as well. So that is the calculator which we would be using in our entire session. Along with that, actuarial tables, obviously that is also a part of it. So let me just share another screen with you all for that. So as all of you would be able to see, just directly going to the formula content first of all. These are the various contents. Now for CS2 specifically, the first heading, mathematical methods, that is something which would be required. Statistical distributions, in case you do not recall from our early studies of CS1 or CT3, you would be requiring them. Then the new section over here of interest would be the statistical methods. Along with that, the section 38, stochastic process, time series, these would also be there. And then obviously from page number 160 onwards, where the probability tables or the percentage tables are there, these would also be required. So that is just the this particular part which I wanted to discuss, which particular section would be required from actuarial tables in CS2. Moving forward, next we would be discussing regarding the paper pattern, exam format, and pass marks. And just before this, I would like to just add that the amount of time, or the amount of preparation you would require in CS2 for practice, I would say it's lesser than what you had devoted to, let's say, a paper like CM1, where you had to practice extensively. In CS2, that is not the case. if you do understand a particular question, let's say like CS1, you would be able to solve it in a very short span of time. And in case you're not understanding what's happening, then even if you devote 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, that would be short. You will in fact find many questions in the CS2 curriculum, which even after going through several times, you might not understand exactly what is happening over here. So that is a part of the paper. You need to accept it. It's perfectly fine. Just that ensure a worst case scenario, even after a lot of effort, you're not being able to understand a particular concept. If a similar question comes in examination, you should be able to replicate it. I mean, just from exam point of view, that is the least you should be able to do. If any sort of similar question which has been asked in the past year does come in examination, you should be in a position to do it, irrespective of whether you understand the concept behind it or not. Apart from that, just keep in mind when you would be studying CS2, few things here and there would be there which might look very challenging on the face of it. Would be interesting, but given that obviously most of you do have time constraints, you might struggle to complete it. The time required would be more on the thought process, how to crack a question rather than actually solving the question. So that is a drastic difference from CM1 examination. As for the hours devoted, we would be shortly coming into it at a later stage in this particular class. Now coming to the paper pattern, exam format, so on. So CS2, again, like the CS1 and CM1 papers which you all would be aware of, these have two components. One is the paper A and the next one is nothing but the paper B. Each of them is of 100 marks each, whether you are appearing from IAI or IFoA, both are of 100 marks. Now from IFoA, 70% weightage is given to paper A, 30% weightage is given to paper B. A set of score is generated or a set of marks is generated out of 100, on the basis of which you either clear the entire paper CS2 or you do not clear the same. Just keep one thing in mind, it is compulsory for students to sit for both the papers. So what I mean by this is, just theoretically speaking, one of you scores 90 out of 100 in CS2 paper A. So that translates into 63 marks. And let's say you sit for paper B, you submit a blank document. So you're scoring a 0 out of 100 and you get a 0 mark. The total of this is 63 marks. And let's say if the pass marks are less than 63, you would be clearing the paper. Fine. But let's say if you did sit for paper A and you didn't sit for paper B only. When I say you didn't sit, means you didn't download the question paper, you didn't upload the document. In that case, you would be failing CS2. So this is just one technicality I wanted to inform you. Ki, you have to sit for both the examinations, submit your documents to be able to get a result for it. So this was from IFoA. From IEI, the pass marks, I will come to pass marks shortly. Let's me first actually discuss regarding IFoA. So in IFoA, the pass marks for CS2 has been relatively on a lower side, anywhere between let's say 55 to 58. So again, but on a very conservative basis and just to maintain parity, assuming all other papers as well, we can think that the pass marks should be in the range of 60 itself. The actual pass marks is something which obviously would be declared after the examination only, but for our purpose, 60 is a very conservative number, and generally it has been lower than that only. Also, if you would see the proportion of students clearing the examination, these are relatively lower for CS2 compared to other papers. Now, in certain terms, you would see that, let's say in the last term, the proportion of students clearing CM1 was very less. That is for the September 2021 session. But again, these are something which are one-offs, and also that it's not directly comparable, I would say, for CM1 or CS1, because many students give those as their first examination, and not all of them go with the same preparation. At least for higher papers, I would say a significantly more proportion of students go with a better preparation. So it's not directly relatable, not to scare you all, but I would say compared to other papers, CS2 is generally a bit more challenging, at least from clearing point of view. Any score of 80 plus, I would say, is brilliant. Like in CM1, 90, 95 plus is brilliant. Here, even if you're getting something over 80, that is brilliant. Very few students I know who have actually scored more than 80 plus, whether it's in the CS2 examination or in under the previous curriculum, the CT4 or the CT6 examinations. So this was regarding IFoA. Note that paper B is using R programming. ones who might not have studied properly for R in their CS1 preparation, or let's say had appeared for CT3 under the old curriculum, there is nothing to worry. Our classes are structured in a way which assumes that a student has no prior knowledge of R programming, even when preparing for CS2. So we would be having certain lectures or classes covering the basics of R, whatever prerequisites are required, of applications of R for CS1 topics, those would also be covered. And then along with that, finally, the application of, let's say, CS2 topics using R programming would be there. So anyone who is taking classes with us, even if you haven't studied for, let's say, R programming in CS1 or earlier properly, or not at all, you would be in a position that you would be able to understand everything from the beginning, since we would be covering the basics of R in our classes itself. Next, for the IA part, the pass marks has been fixated as 50. Although I don't think right now any formal information regarding this is available on the website. Once they had released a particular document which stated pass marks was 50, but then later it wasn't available in the download section. But if you just see the marks of students, most of them have passed, scoring of 50, and unofficially that is the pass marks set for all the papers. Now note that previously there was a communication that under II, one needs to clear the examinations. That is, one needs to clear both paper A and paper B part individually. If that is the case, in that case, for the purpose of clearing, this 70% and 30% ratio does not make sense. Because if a student is scoring anything more than 50, both in paper A and paper B, then whatever weightage you take, the final marks would be more than 50 only, and that particular student would be clearing. Obviously, for the purpose of calculation of final marks, or in case one is looking to secure a rank, in that case, one could take the 70 and 30% weightage to be the case, and how the final marks are calculated. Now, coming to the current set of structure, no MCQs are expected for CS2A, at least for IFoA examinations. The exams are intended to remain online for September 2022 session. In fact, that has already been confirmed. And going forward also, IFoA has intended to keep the exams online only. Obviously, there is a new set of information in the form of, moving to a new way of conducting examinations by IFoA in the form of objective based assessment. If and when it comes for CS2 is something we need to look at least for September 2022 session. Exams will be conducted the way it was, let's say, in April 21 session or earlier. Paper B is again using R programming itself. As for II, for July 2022 session, the exams are going to remain online only, in using their own platform the way they have held previously. MCQs are a part of CS2A. It could constitute anywhere between 10 to 40% of the paper. Again, I would have to concede they are a bit more volatile with respect to with the consistency of paper. So it could be that the proportion of MCQs could be lesser or even more than that. But keeping in mind the past years and other papers, it broadly should be in this particular range. As for the December session, there is no communication right now. II did show its intention to keep the exams offline in nature if the COVID situation permits, but there has been no final confirmation. So maybe towards the December month, let's say 2-3 months before that, they might be formally communicating whether the exams will be online or offline. So in case they are online, it would mostly be in the same setup as the current one, and in case it's offline, at that point of time, whether MCQs would be there or would not be there, we would have to take a look at that. As for the purpose of practice, we wouldn't be giving you all any MCQ questions. The simple reason being that, first of all, none is asked in IFoA. And even for II, if at all they are asked, you would have to, be able to replicate the steps at least on paper to come up with the final answer. So instead of giving you all 3 marks, 4 marks MCQ, wherein you just try to find the answer, ultimately you should know how to be able to write them, because in II it could be that the same question which was earlier asked in MCQ format has now been asked in a format wherein you need to give the entire solution for it. So on a very conservative basis, it would remain the best that you all continue to practice, assuming that you need to solve the numericals in full. Just keep in mind, as long as MCQs are there in II, you do not need to show the workings of it. You just need to give the final answer. The workings I'm referring to is basically for our own purpose of solving the particular question. So this was basically regarding the paper pattern, exam format, and the pass marks. Next, coming to the number of chapters, the relative difficulty, if there is any connection or link between the different chapters in CS2. So let us go and cover that part as well. There are a total of 21 chapters which are part of the 2022 curriculum. Again, whether you're using the 2019 version, 2021 or 22, the naming of chapters remains the same, although there has been significant change in content, specifically in two chapters. One is machine learning, that is the last chapter, and another in method modality projection. So ones who are using, let's say, the 2019, 20 or 21 material, you could continue to use. So I mean, you can obviously look at the upgraded syllabus available in the website. We ourselves would be sharing that with you shortly over the groups itself. And for the ones who have joined recently, you all would be getting over the next couple of weeks the 2022 version, which you could directly be using. But do note in mind, it's not a necessity to use 2022 version. You could take the help of the earlier version and just map the changes which has been there. Major changes have been primarily in two chapters only. So we have a total of 21 chapters. Like other papers, the chapters have been divided into different parts. So here also the 21 chapters have been divided into 4 parts. So we have 4 parts to it, and X assignments, as you're all aware of. These basically constitute questions from a particular cluster of topics. I'm sorry, it's not actually 4 part. We actually have 5 assignments for CS2. So this is the next page. We have 5 assignments. So X assignments basically constitutes questions which you could attempt under, let's say, mock exam conditions for a particular set of topics. Do keep in mind that there are certain, I would say, relatively significant changes in the questions which you will find in 2019 version or 20 version and the 2022 version for X assignments. The institute has kept more questions, keeping in mind the current set of online exams. Online exams. So you will find certain difference in questions. Just keep one thing in mind. It's not that for IFoA, given exams are online, they might not ask any questions which has a lot of derivation. In fact, even in the most recent term, that is the April 2022 term, compared to the other 2-3 past papers, there was a significant proportion of derivation involved. So your strategy should remain the same. Obviously, you shouldn't expect 40 to 60% of the paper could be complete derivation, numerical based, involving a lot of mathematical typing. But it shouldn't be the case that you do not practice any sort of derivation, assuming it cannot be asked given the online set of exams. They have been asking that, and they could ask that in the comment session as well. So your preparation structure remains the same. If exam format changes, we would let you know. Other than that, the way you would have prepared for it, assuming that the exams are normal pen and paper examination, things would remain the same, at least from a preparation point of view. So out of these 21 chapters, stochastic process is the first chapter which I would be covering. It sets the base, covers a lot of concepts. Ones, let's say, who have prepared for CM2 earlier, and have, let's say, taken classes from us, we cover stochastic process there as well, in case one didn't study CS2 before that. So this will cover a lot of definitions, a lot of different processes. Again, details of which would be covered in separate chapters. So what would happen is, when we are taking the class of stochastic process, there would be few terminologies which we would be just mentioning, giving a brief description about it, and a more detailed explanation is something which would be covered in later chapters. When you are reading the material, you would find a lot more content regarding few topics. The only reason we haven't covered this separately is, once we cover the other chapters which revolves around those topics, there the complete explanation would be given there. So just keep in mind, once you are reading the material for chapter 1 specifically, you might find few additional things which might not have been covered in the class or the pre-recorded lecture available. But those again have been covered in other parts. Then chapter 2 to chapter 5 is basically covering the Markov process. So chapter 2, I could say, is independent. 3 is also a bit independent. Obviously, this does require knowledge of chapter 1. 4 and 5 again is a different set of cluster of chapter. Common thing is all of these are Markov models, and I would say most of the students find difficulty in chapter number 2, 4, 5. That is the most difficult portion which students feel in. Chapter 2, reason being, you generally have to come up with a model. A lot of students struggle with that. And it's honestly challenging if you get a new question where you need to create a model during examination. Although I would say this is of all the topics I've studied so far in actuarial, solving Markov chain questions are the most fun because you need to come up with models. If you're not preparing it, let's say from exam point of view, I mean, this is something which would, you'll always have it in mind. You should go and attempt this question because ultimately it's just to do with basic probabilities and you being able to understand what we are trying to model. Chapter 4, chapter 5, students get difficulty in Markov jump processes because it has a lot of rigorous mathematical use, be it solving integrations, solving differential equations, or using certain other mathematical or statistical methods. That is where students generally tend to struggle. So this is the part which I would say students generally struggle in this entire paper. Chapter 6 is something where you will find a lot of overlap with what you have studied, let's say in paper CM1, in case you have studied for it before, life assurance contract, life annuity, random variables like TX, LX, so on. These things are there covered in chapter 6 to some extent. And then chapter 7, 8, 9 are again something which are almost independent in nature, but as a whole, chapter 6 to 9 have a lot of common, let's say, topics at a very high level. Similarly, chapter 10, chapter 10 and chapter 11 does have some sort of reference to the various assurance or annuity contracts which one would have studied in CM1. So in case you have studied for CM1 beforehand, it will be very easy for you to relate to it. In case you haven't, it's not a compulsion. Certain things it might go above your head. So you could, let's say, just take a look at the material, understand the products, and then you'll be able to understand the application over here. Then we have modality projection. This is, I would be coming to it in more detail, which topics were part of CT6, CT4, or which were totally new topics under the 2019 curriculum, slightly later. Then time series 13 and 14, again, this corresponds to one big set of topic. Frequently, questions do come from time series. Almost all papers will have one question of time series, and specifically in paper B as well. For the past 3 terms, it hadn't come, but this session from IFoA, they had come. Even in II, the tendency for time series questions is relatively higher. Then we have loss distributions, which I would say is basically building upon our CS1 or CT3 knowledge. We would be studying a bit more distributions in detail, be it, let's say, the Pareto distribution or gamma distribution, Weibull distribution, something which we hadn't studied in much detail in the earlier paper. And you might again come up with topics like maximum likelihood estimation, method of movements, censoring, things which you already had studied in CS1. Then we have extreme value theory again, and then finally we basically have Copula's reinsurance, risk modeling, and machine learning. Reinsurance, fundamentally, I would say, is the most important topic, keeping in mind its application in the general insurance industry, even life insurance. And a lot of interview questions based on CS2 comes from the reinsurance topic only. Again, I would say this is a very scoring topic, reinsurance and all. So of all the chapters I highlighted, students tend to struggle most in the Markov part, that is chapter 2 to 5. Machine learning, because it's a lot of theoretical content, and in machine learning as well as modality projection, which again has a lot of theoretical content. And given that these two are completely new to the curriculum, there are not much questions which you would be having for practice. So this was regarding the chapter's difficulty. As for relation, if I want to get a bit more specific, chapter 1 knowledge is required, I would say, for most of the chapters. Chapter 2 to 5 is independent. 6, 7, 8, 9 all are independent of each other. Again, there's a story being built up, but again, the topics within these chapters are almost independent. So even if you start with chapter 8, without other chapters, you would be in a position to understand whatever is happening there. Chapter 10 and 11 does draw upon some knowledge from, let's say, chapter 6 or chapter 9, very slight. Otherwise, it's again independent. 12 is independent. Time series also just requires knowledge from stochastic process. Rest, it's all independent. Loss distribution, completely independent, just takes your CS1 knowledge. EVT, again, completely independent. Copula's independent. Reinsurance, independent. Risk models assumes that you have knowledge of reinsurance. Machine learning is again independent. So when I say independent, it means even if you pick up this chapter directly, you would be in a position where you understand bulk of the things there, which is something very different from other papers where those chapters will be requiring concepts from previous other chapters. So this was regarding the description about the number of chapters, how to go about it, so on. Next, what all we would be doing for practicing questions. First thing, that after attending the live class or watching the recorded lecture, you should be reading the material in its own. Do keep in mind, for certain chapters you'll find the CS2 material very taxing. Most of the concepts, I would say, for all practical purpose, almost all concepts are covered in our lectures itself, but for completeness you should always be reading the material, because there would be few small things which might be there. For few chapters you might face a lot of difficulty because the type of language they have used is not very easy to interpret, but then that is fine. It's something not specific to any one of you. Most students tend to experience difficulty in reading material for few chapters of CS2. Now, once you're done reading the material, there are questions given at the end of each material which you would be solving. There are questions given in between the material which you should be solving. Part of it we would be covering through our classes itself. And apart from that, the key most important thing from practice, whether you're appearing from II or IFoA, is using revision notes. Now, do keep in mind, irrespective of whenever you have joined us in the last year, 2 years back, or currently, we would be sharing the 2019 edition. It is completely relevant to the current set of syllabus. The reason for not giving you a, let's say a 2022 version or a 21 version is we have curated several videos covering almost all questions there where we are discussing the solutions. So all the numberings are there basis what is there in 2019 version. So each version, the numberings of the question keeps changing. So it's not possible to, let's say cover all questions in a singular term. First of all, we do not have that much of time. Secondly, that doesn't leave any questions for you all to solve at your own pace. So 2019 version is something which is completely fit to use. You do not need or you don't need to buy separately the 2022 version or anything. Whatever questions have come up after this is something which is directly available on the website. So you can take a look at that and attempt for this papers under mock exam conditions itself. Once you're done with revision notes, unlike CM1 or CS1, the number of attempts which students take in solving for CS2 is way more. I wouldn't recommend ki you should do it at least twice, at least thrice. It depends, how you're going about it. For ones who do not take a look at their solutions, only try to attempt the questions yourselves. In case of getting the majority of the questions correct, doing it even once should be completely, fine. Ones who have a tendency to look at the solutions and then try to understand, for them, doing the questions twice, thrice could be required. You will see that the number of questions are less comparatively compared to paper, let's say CM1 or even I would say CS1. That most of the time would be required to understand the question and how to approach it. Once you know the starting point, getting the end result is going to be extremely easy for most of the CS2 topics. So this is the core part of your practicing, whether you're appearing from IEI or IFoA. I guess most of you would be aware, these basically consist of the past year IFoA questions segregated topic wise. So for CS2, the number of booklets which we have in the revision notes is, let me just check that. We have total of 12 booklets, but you will see that 2 booklets does not have any questions to practice as such, because there are no past year questions available for reference. So we have a total of 12 booklets under revision notes 2019. And as you will see, all these 12 topics are mostly independent of each other. So this was regarding revision notes. Then you obviously need to solve X assignments and Y assignments, which are relevant for paper A and paper B part. Along with that, once you're done with this, once appearing from IFoA should target to complete all papers from 2005 till 2022. Which papers to use from old curriculum, I would be coming across that. Once you're appearing from II, in case revision notes is the first thing you should be solving, even though you are appearing from II. the type of questions they tend to ask specifically for CS2, a lot of them will be similar to what the IFoA tends to ask. You will see they have modified few questions. The overall structure remains same, just the numbers or all they change it. So for practice, revision notes is the key part. After that, if you have time, first complete the IFoA papers and then start with IA papers. In case you're short on time, you should be basically using, let's say, once done with revision notes, you should be, let's say, using the IA past papers itself. Just keep one thing in mind, as you go across the older papers, let's say 2017 or earlier, from II, the level of difficulty which you're going to see in questions is going to be extremely high compared to what is asked in IFoA right now or even in IA right now. So just keep that in mind while solving it. If you just take a look at the past number of students passing in those sessions, in a lot of terms, out of, let's say 20, 50, 100 students appearing, maybe 2 clear, 4 clear, 5 clear. So the papers were genuinely extremely difficult. You will also find, a lot of seniors who have actually cleared all their examinations, but they are left with, let's say, CT4, CT6, CT8, or under the new curriculum CS2 or CM2, because they do tend to struggle in these papers. They are extremely technical in nature, so they do tend to struggle over here. So this was regarding the practice part. Coming next to the mapping of to the old curriculum. So how CS2 paper was devised was, almost all the chapters of CT4 were taken. Along with that, let's say 3 to 4 concepts from CT6 was taken, close to 6 chapters. And then there were 4, I would say, relatively new topics. Some of these might have been touched in detail in higher papers like SP series, but primarily I would say these are not touched upon in the initial papers. So there were 4 new topics as well. Of these 4 new topics is what I'm referring to. 2 topics were completely new to the actuarial curriculum, and you will not find many questions for practice. And actually this corresponds to machine learning and modality projection. So chapter wise, which topics come from which chapters. Chapter number 1 onwards till chapter number 11. This is completely from CT4 part. There was another chapter in CT4 which had been moved to CM1, principles of actuarial modeling. Apart from that, there was another chapter called binomial models, different from what you have done in CT3 or CS1. That is no more a part of the syllabus. So till chapter number 11, everything was there in CT4. Chapter number 12 is a new introduction to curriculum. Chapter 13, 14, 15 were from CT6. Chapter 16 is again something new to this. Parts of it might have been tested in, let's say, higher papers, but I would say it's relatively new. And then finally, Populas is again something new. Some part of it was covered in higher paper like a SP7, which corresponds to general insurance reserving. But I would say primarily to the initial setup, it's new. 18 to 20 is something directly coming from CT6 only, and chapter 21 is again something which is completely new. So 4 chapters I would say are new to the curriculum. That is, first being mortality projection, which I feel is the worst one among all these 4 preparation wise. Then we have EVT formulas. Both of them are relatively easier to understand, has a lot of mathematical derivations and all, but it's relatively easier. And then we have machine learning, which I will say again some students tend to struggle. Now keep in mind, leaving machine learning for all other chapters, I would be covering them in the paper A part. Machine learning, whether it's paper A application or paper B application, that is something Gunjan would be covering. So you might have a common class, let's say 2 to 4 classes of machine learning, where a first couple of classes would be Gunjan covering the paper A relevant parts, and then the last 2 classes, let's say, could be for the paper B part. So this is mapping to the old curriculum. Again, when you are taking a look of CT4 papers, past papers, you can attempt almost all questions. Certain parts of it will not be relevant to the current syllabus, because within chapters also there were few additions or subtractions. Apart from that, bulk of the paper is relevant to CS2 curriculum. For CT6, let's say in every paper you will see that 40% of the questions, 40% of the questions are relevant for the current curriculum. So the approach should be directly you cannot solve the CT6 entire paper, because some portions of it has been shifted to CS1, Some portions have been shifted to CM2. So only the topics which are there, you will be able to relatively, identify them easily. You should be attempting those itself. So this was mapping to the old curriculum. Next thing is a lot of you tend to ask, point 8 is idle hours to devote. What are the idle hours to devote? A very generic figure I would say is 250 hours, but I would say it's a useless figure. Some students do give way less than that and still are able to clear. Some students have given almost twice of that, still not being able to clear. So it depends. Ideally, you should be putting in, let's say, 2-3 hours on average on a daily basis, or on a weekly basis, it should be, let's say, around 20 hours or so. If you're doing that for the next 5 months till September term, you should be in a very decent preparation. You have close to 150 days. So even if you take 3 hours on a daily basis, it's 450 hours. Obviously, ones who are attempting in the July term, you would have to primarily rely on, let's say, the recorded lectures, and the amount of hours you'll have to put in case you're appearing for the paper for the first time will be significantly higher. For December term, again, you should not be very laid back and think, we have examinations in December term, so we can go a bit slow. Try to be at par with this class, complete syllabus, keeping in mind, let's say you have an examination in September, and let's say if things go good, you could pick up a short paper and appear it in December term, or you could devote the last 3 months in completely solving the II papers. If any one of you have actually solved II papers, been able to understand most of the questions, even if it is after referring to solutions, the level of knowledge you would have will be far more higher than most of your peers, because actually the difficulty of questions is very high for CT4 and CT6, which used to come from II 2017-18 or earlier. I've already mentioned about the past papers to practice. Next is the mathematical typing. So the ones who have already appeared, let's say, for exams in this new current online format, you all could wish to continue solving on MS Word right from the beginning itself. For anyone who is sitting for CS2 as their first examination under new curriculum, might have given CT3 under old curriculum, is their first paper, I could say maybe the first 1 month or 2 months, you could try to solve things on paper, get an idea, a grip of the concepts. Let's say once you're done with half of the syllabus, or if just 2 to 2.5 months are remaining for examinations, start solving everything on Word. Progressively, you should all be progressing, doing everything on MS Word itself. And as for finally the completion of syllabus, I mean, we have an internal deadline of August 8. Good thing about CS2 is we are less dependent on how your preparation goes about, because the topics are independent. Even if you haven't studied for one topic, if you keep a class for a new topic, you will be at least able to understand what we're teaching in the particular class. So 8 August is the deadline which we have in mind, but obviously we would try to let's say complete the syllabus 2 to 3 weeks before that if possible. Right now we have scheduled 5 classes on average per week to begin with. Monday, Wednesday, Friday 1 p.m. and Saturday, Sunday, what's the time? 3 p.m. is the timing. Note that in the month of May and June, the frequency of classes could be increased, given that a lot of you have do not have colleges right now or any sort of examinations. So it could be that we are taking classes on a every day itself. We intend to teach paper A and paper B together. When I say that, what I mean is that it could be that in a week out of 5 classes, I'm taking 3 classes for paper A, Gunjan is taking 2 classes for paper B. In certain weeks, depending on our preparation, it could also be that I'm taking all classes for paper A, or Gunjan is taking all classes for paper B. But it's not going to be that the first 3 months I'm covering paper A and then the last month or 2 is kept for paper B. And it is again strongly advised and expected that you all would be studying for paper A and paper B simultaneously, else a lot of you tend to struggle in paper B. Also keep that in mind. Resolving paper A doubts is a lot more easier. Paper B doubts takes time, because Gunjan might have to take a look at your Excel sheet. In case of CS2, take a look at your R programming script, run the code herself to see if there is any error or not. So if you come back with a lot of doubts towards the end, resolution of those is something which might be very difficult in a time-bound manner. So ideally, you should be, if you're appearing in the September term, you should be done with your syllabus latest by August 8. When I say done with your syllabus, what I mean is taking a look, attending the live classes, all conceptual classes, or let's say recorded lectures, reading the material, solving the questions given at the end of material, and solving the revision notes at least once. This is something which is the bare minimum you should be targeting to complete by August 8. And then in the last 4 to 6 weeks, for CS2, it does take some time to revise, given that the topics are independent. You should be completely focusing on practicing papers. And when I say practicing papers, it is not just sitting for past examinations and then leaving it. You should be solving the papers, marking yourself, give yourself a range of marks, and then see where you are going wrong. A lot of you might have strong prior beliefs that I am little bit weak in this topic, or this some other topic is strong, but when it comes to scoring marks, it could be the reverse. So instead of believing in your gut feeling to begin with, I would say believe in the data you have, because that is what you need to do. The topics where you are facing issues, that is where you need to devote most of your time. So this was regarding the structure. Just to give you a brief idea with respect to the number of conceptual classes, it generally takes us to cover the paper A topics. So stochastic process generally takes us one class. Markov chain, two class, or even you could cover in one class. Second class is mostly for solving different type of questions. Let's just take us two for time being. Chapter 3 takes us one class. Chapter 4 and chapter 5 together will take a total of three classes. That makes it 7 in total. Chapter 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 each will take one classes each. Chapter 12 is something will again take one class, and it's mostly theory. Even if I take a live class for it, you will see that mostly I'm reading out from the material, because there is not much to understand or solve as such. It's mostly going over the theory itself. Time series 1 and 2, these are heavy topics. It takes me 6 classes to cover, 3 classes for time series 1, 3 classes for time series 2. And these classes are roughly between, let's say 2 hours on average. Loss distributions should be taking one class. EVT should be taking 2 classes. Copulas will be taking 3 classes, because in the first class, I tend to cover joint distributions in detail, which you already have studied in CS1 or CT3, but might have forgotten. Reinsurance should be done in one class. Risk model 1, risk model 2, each will take one class. Machine learning could take 2 classes. So in total, if you will see, it's close to coming out to 6, 8, 10, 11. Close to, there are, let's say, 32 to 33 conceptual lectures. Now, the initial intention is to cover all of these conceptual lectures in the live class, be it online or offline. But depending upon our preparation, the time available, and other factors as well, it could happen that for few lectures, especially ones which are theoretical in nature, or for which we feel the current set of videos are pretty good, we might ask you to go through those itself, so that more classes could be kept in the form of doubt clearing classes or question solving classes. And compared to other papers, I would say the doubt classes for CS2 are a bit different, because at least for the Markov model parts, each student might have their own particular model. So it's not that whatever I'm discussing is relevant to all of you. I need to individually take up, look at your model, why it is correct, why it is incorrect. So it takes a bit of time. For other things, it's a lot more standard. In CS2, it might take more time, to resolve your doubts. Given that this is just for chapter 2 to 5, because all of you come up with different models, and I need to explain individually why your particular model is incorrect. If it's correct, well and good, but if it's incorrect, it takes individual time to explain why that is the case. So as of now, we do plan to cover all of them, but again, depending on your progress and the availability of time, we might ask you all to watch a few of the recorded lectures, and we would be using the live class instead to, let's say, for doubt clearing purpose, or let's say solving the important or the difficult questions for those particular topics. So this is what all I had. Now feel free to ask any doubts, leaving apart academic doubts for the time being for this session. Apart from that, if you have any questions regarding CS2 exam format, anything, feel free to ask. Else I'm done from my end. Anything? One's attending the online classes, anything? If not, just type a no in the chat box. I'll understand there are no doubts from your end. there are no classes this particular weekend. We would be starting from Monday itself from chapter 1. Whether I go serially or not, generally I tend to go serially. At times I cover the Markov models towards the end. So that is something I'm still deciding on, depending upon the time available, what would be the best way to go ahead. So I would be informing you in due course of time. Um, okay. So no doubts from Sachin. Others, if you don't have any queries, let me know. Just type a no. I'll wrap up the class then. CSO, one of you is asking is we had something called EBCT in CS1 and we have EBT over here. EBCT, there was empirical based credibility theory. Here EBT is extreme value theory. So both are very different, completely different, I would say. So we have to complete the syllabus as well as booklets till August 8. Ideally, yes, Earth, you should be completing the syllabus as well as booklets by August 8 so that the last 4 to 6 weeks you get your time to solve past papers and analyze your mistakes and work on improving them. Okay, I don't see any other doubts from others, so I'll wrap it up then. Thanks everyone for attending the session.